Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming, for making the time for this slightly strange way of interacting. So I hope you get entertained. I will be talking to you about the LIMPET Marine Monitoring Program, which is a citizen science program I've developed with some very enthusiastic educators and scientists 2 years ago, roundabout. We hope that it will be a long-term program. And yeah, here it is. So first question that most people ask is, what does LIMPET stand for? Well, it's an acronym. Everyone can guess that. And it stands for Long-Term Intertidal Monitoring through Participation, Evaluation, and Training. So that's quite a mouthful, but I'll unpack all of these in the next talk. And this is where it is. So who are the people behind LIMPET? That's us. We call ourselves the Limpets, and we have, you see here on the left, okay, I can use this cursor, the educators. So these are teachers primarily of the Center for Conservation Education in Wynberg, Cape Town, and they have been taking learners to the rocky shores for more than 20 years. So here you see my colleague Anton. He's very enthusiastic. He loves the rocky shores and he loves teaching about the rocky shores. And we met about 3 years ago at a conference where I gave a talk and I basically said, rocky shores are ideal teaching tools, you know, use them. And he came after the talk and said, okay, let's do it. And from this first interaction, we started finding other people that in our networks that were interested and keen. This is us, and you see there's a sort of a spectrum from the educators to some people being educators and scientists, to scientists, and here's our techno-limpet, that's Sinden, and he's assisting us with website and apps and things like that. So that's the limpets, and here's what we're trying to do. I mean, this is, you know, dream big. We would like to have a paradise that's free of plastic. We'd like to have an ocean that is not only free of plastic, but also healthy. And obviously, firstly, we need to foster environmental stewardship in our population and primarily the youth, because that's our tomorrow. These are the people who are holding the future of our planet. So that's a big word, it's a big goal. How do we do that? Well, another thing we had to realize is in South Africa, a lot of learners are not very literate when it comes to maths and science. Not only maths and science, but at this stage, I think only 20% of university graduates are in the science, mathematics, technology, and engineering fields. And that's probably because the secondary education isn't very strong in these subjects. So we thought, okay, at the same time as fostering environmental stewardship, we'd also like to build on maths and science skills and, you know, make it fun, because that's the only way you can actually convince youth that it's worthwhile pursuing something, we feel. Yeah, and then also at the same time, I like data, I like spreadsheets. So I thought, let's generate some valuable data in the process. So I mentioned I like data. I work for the Department of we now called Environment, Forestry and Fisheries temporarily. We'll change our name again. So this is my day job. I'm running a rocky shore monitoring program around the coast of South Africa. Here's some where the green ticks are, you know, is where we have sites. The white ticks are planned sites where we have, you know, we're setting up sites. And we regularly go there and monitor biodiversity. And that is also to ensure that we have a healthy ocean environment, which is written in the Constitution, and being working for government, obviously, this is what we serve. As you can see by all those logos that are scattered around the slide, is that this cannot be done on your own. When I was tasked with this, I was by myself. At this stage, didn't have a technical support, or you know, I was just a one-woman show. Now that has changed a little. But I then reached out to all these organizations and said, okay, I mean, you also have this in your mandate. You can see the conservation agencies like DENK in the Northern Cape, sand parks, Cape Nature, Eastern Cape Parks, Edinburgh, they have to do this as well and monitor. Let's do it together. So this is what we're doing. And we had also approached universities, and then LIMPET is now part of this monitoring program. So this is because I'm the data hungry monitoring person on the team. And the objectives of the bigger program to which LIMPET contributes is to detect impacts of climate change, alien invasive species, pollution, harvesting, mining, all sorts of anthropogenic impacts that we've become aware of on marine ecosystems. So, but I focus on rocky shores, and a lot of people think, rocky shores? Isn't that more land than sea? Well, not really. Here, firstly, rocky shores, I will show you just now, are full marine ecosystems as much as they are. The intertidal rocky shores fall between the tides, between the high tide mark and the low tide mark. And for those who don't know, in South Africa, we have a tidal range of about 2 meters. And twice a day, the tide moves from high tide to low tide, back to high tide, and back to low tide. So all within 24 hours. So the sea level goes up and down and then exposes the rim along all our continents, which is the intertidal zone. And this is really a wonderful ecosystem. I'll show you now. It's also very accessible because if you go there during low tide, especially around full moon or new moon, which is called spring low tide, you can walk on dry land, but you actually, in the way, you're in the sea, but you're dry. And what you see are sea creatures. And you see all sorts of sea creatures. Here are some, the foundation of everything is algae. Everything eats salad, vegetables. These are the marine salad and vegetables, are algae. You can see them there on these other pictures as well. Then you have organisms that feed off the algae. So you have grazers, like sea urchins and limpets. And then you have predators, like crabs, starfish. There's a mini octopus, mini being a baby. This is a periwinkle that it's on. So this was, maybe half a centimeter big. And other very cool creatures that are filtering the water for particles in it. So in this case, these are zoanthids and barnacles. So all of these and a lot more you can find in the intertidal zone on rocky shores. So really it is like diving without getting wet. And this is where we thought, this is an opportunity. You can take people who can't even swim to have a full-on marine biodiversity experience on these rocky shores. So yeah, that's what we do. So the objectives of LIMPET are, we try to reach our future ocean stewards, which are learners, and a way to reach them is to engage with their teachers. And that comes from a realization that a lot of us are where we are in life because we've been influenced by teachers. Personally, I had a very good biology teacher, and now I'm a biologist. I had very bad language teachers. It's still not my passion. You can hear it by the accent. So, so we really would like to work with teachers closely and build their enthusiasm for the topic so that they can be champions in communicating that in youth. At the same time, we also like to involve youth in real science, and that's the real core of LIMPET. And we go through a whole scientific experience. So for those that have forgotten what that means, we go to the schools and we introduce learners to concepts, scientific concepts, or broader questions, from which we start asking questions. And the question is the basis of science. You can call it a hypothesis, same thing, but phrased slightly differently. And then we take youth to collect data to answer the questions. And here you can see on the right, this is what it looks like. This is data collection for a marine biologist. So we take them out on field trips, and that's great fun. Then we return those data, we go back to the schools, we turn the data into nice graphs, which is where my heart beats faster when I see data again. And then we involve them in interpreting data. There's, for example, a time series with some trends in, and we discuss these kinds of things with them. What we want to do also, because we work in a South African context, is we really would like to approach a focus on disadvantaged youth. I don't know if that's the correct word, but youth from backgrounds that wouldn't otherwise have those experiences. And it was a shocking realization for me that there are people, that there's youth, probably also adults, that live less than 5 kilometers away from the ocean and have never been on a rocky shore. You know, that's something we'd like to remedy. And the way to get to those youth is to provide limpet for free. This is really the idea, to disadvantaged youth. We have some ideas, we've been making some progress, you know, but we can always improve and reach more. We'd also like to assist, you know, once you identified the 1 or 2 learners from a class that have a particular interest, we like to foster that interest and take them further, you know, maybe get them involved in a science expo project or alike. And then I've mentioned already, we'd like the data that are collected by the learners to contribute to national databases. I've mentioned the program I'm leading for DEFF, the National Rocky Shore Monitoring Program. And there's another database that's run by the Beach Co-op, the Dirty Dozen database, which is also a national database. And we also have our own server access data portal where we keep our own time series. That said, we've only been running since 2018, so we're in our 3rd year of Limpet. Oops, this is now skipped ahead. Well, here's teacher training workshops. What are we doing there? Well, firstly, we're running them twice a year, more or less, depending on demand. And we train teachers in the same methodology. So we go through a whole Limpet experience with the teachers in a much smaller setting with a lot of questions and answer times. So it's very interactive. And we are particularly interested in creating something that helps teachers, you know, something that doesn't add to their workload, but takes some of their workload away. So we can generate, for example, our worksheets in a way that they can mark them and they contribute directly to their curriculum and workload. So, you know, it's really about finding synergies, finding the win-win in everything. That's really what we're aiming for. The teacher training workshops are really quite fun in that teachers meet each other, and, you know, it's a networking opportunity as well. And we also wanted to have, you know, if teachers want to do Limpet but not involve us, that's also an option. All the materials can be made available. They're available for free on the website. And, you know, if you can facilitate your own Limpet experience, that's very fine with us. So, but then again, the core is working with the learners, and here they are. We've been focusing on grade 10s for starters. So we just done 2 years of piloting with a grade 10. The reason being that a grade 10 have a field trip in the curriculum, so it's quite easy to align. But we've also had requests to involve grade 11s, and my colleagues from the Center for Conservation Education take learners of all ages out onto the rocky shore, and they incorporate a little bit of science here and there, but our really structured program is with the grade 10s. So in 2018 and 19, we have had 16 monitoring surveys and involved 669 grade 10 learners. That was with very little funding, because most of us, and I should have mentioned it before, are affiliated to organizations that pay our salaries. So we really raised funds primarily to get learners to the rocky shore, so that's transport, have food parcels for them, and, you know, that's pretty much it. The rest was funded through our various organizations, which I thank at the end. And this is what we do. So on the rocky shores, like I said, we involve learners in real science. So this is very much what the Rocky Shore Monitoring Program I've designed also is doing. If we have transects, you know, I don't know if you can see that this is supposed to be a rocky shore and there's supposed to be the sea here. And these are transect lines. And every 5 meters, you have a bolt. So that marks that transect over time, so that you always have the same transect by finding those bolts that are 5 meters apart. We have 3 of those transects. That's because science needs replication. And you might be wondering, why do we take photographs? Well, this is why we take photographs. This is an example from another area, Eastern Cape, where there was the Pfaff Marine Protected Area that was, well, where harvesting was originally prohibited for about more than 20 years. And then the MPA needed to be rezoned because there was so much public pressure, lots of conflict, and they opened certain areas to harvesting. So we went there before. You can see here, this is the photograph of the same piece of rock taken. So it's essentially, if you look to the right, it's not quite this one, but it's coming here in 2015 and then coming back to the same piece of rock in 2016 again. So same piece of rock, you can see the crack running through. There's a clump of mussels before harvesting was allowed, and then a year later, that clump of mussels is gone. You can see also there are a few barnacles here, and here there's a lot of barnacles here taking the space of the mussels. So by just communicating this to you, photographs are an objective tool. So if I would have recorded this the previous year and I would have told you there were 15 mussels and then they're gone, it wouldn't have meant the same than showing you the photograph where you can see for yourself. It's much more objective and it's a permanent record, and other people might get different information from it. Maybe they'd be interested in something else you can see in the picture, So it has versatile use. And if you fix something in space, like I showed you, if you take the same photograph again and again, you can use some very powerful statistics, and you can detect very small changes that are statistically significant. Whereas if you don't use transects, you have to spend a lot more effort, to get the same statistical power. So that's why we fix them along transects. So this is the science part. Now, next activity we do with the learners is exploration. Okay, we're not in this sense harvesting the learners for data here. This is to have fun and to learn at the same time. But we give them this worksheet, and this is just half of it, the 23 species altogether that we have pictures of. And then we have, for example, of the anemone, we have type of feeder, because that's something that links up with the grade 10 curriculum, and the zone where they occur. So, anemone is carnivorous, you might not know, but it is, so they have to tick here. And then where do you find most anemones? Oh, you can find them, yes, you find them in pools. You don't find them in the high shore, you find them maybe in the low shore. So they can tick, and there's no mark, there's not a marked sheet. It really is to get learners to explore, have a tool in their hand to explore in case they've never actually engaged with any rocky shore organisms before, and to think about how these organisms live, how they feed and where they occur. So that's just basic ecological understanding. The next activity we do with them is now really the core of the data of the citizen science, I would say. And again, you see here on the left, those 3 transects that we fixed. And now on these 3 transects, we create these enclosures. They're just rope on the floor. But, we just have these 5 by 5 meter squares that we have in the low shore, so close to the sea, mid shore, and high shore. And if you know the rocky shore, there will be different organisms associated with all these zones. Because the low shore tends to be a lot wetter and a lot more marine and densely packed with organisms, and the high shore is a lot more terrestrial. So you find only creatures that can withstand the sun and being dry for most of the time. So we then ask learners to not leave those enclosures, and we have often three groups of learners. If you have 60 learners, you'd have 20 on the one transect, 20 on the other, and 20 on the third. So that is nice. You have nice oversight. And then in these enclosures, the learners have their own quadrats, and they put them down, and in those quadrats, they learn to identify species. Here are the 5 species that we use for Cape Town right now at our first site, and we're trying to establish more sites in future. Then they have to count them in their quadrats. So they have 50 by 50 centimeter quadrats, like real scientific quadrats. And then they have to measure them with the rulers. So we don't use calipers, it was too difficult. and they measure the first 20. So now why do we do that? First, I wanted to show you what it looks like. Okay, here's the quadrat. So this is really exactly what we do on our scientific surveys. Not much different at all. You can see here the enclosure that we made with the rope, those 5 by 5 meter quadrats that we tried to get them in to take their little quadrats inside. You see one of the learners describe. They work in triplets. There will be a scribe and 2 observers. They sit on these knee pads or these knee boards because it is a little bit hard otherwise. And then they measure and they count. So that's what it looks like. Yeah, okay. Now to the why. Again, this is citizen science, so we're trying to generate data. Now we've only been running for 2 years. And I don't have a data time series to show you yet, primarily because the data are locked in my office in this COVID time, and I haven't been able to access them. But here's an example of where we can take this. This is from my student in Diviwe, who is currently busy with his master's. He showed that here the counts of limpets, from which you can get densities. So the density is basically how many per quadrat, in this case. Has gone down between 1970 and 2017. Okay, and he looked at this limpet on the right, which is a harvested limpet, at a site that was previously not harvested and now is harvested. It's close to Masipumalele for those that know the area, Komiki. So in 1970, very little harvesting, lots of limpets. Then 2017, it's gone down. Black and the white bars are just 2 sites in that area, Wireless Island and Wireless Point. Then with regards to the measurements, here you can see the ruler. These are sizes also of that same limpet here, where we've measured alongside the length. It's called shell length in scientific terms. And you can see the average length in 1970 was significantly bigger to what it is now. And that's also because harvesting has an effect on sizes, because people tend to take the big ones. So this is the same principle that people apply to make complicated fisheries models, that give us then an idea what the state of our populations are, of our animal population, of our harvested populations, of our stocks. So this is where the data can be useful. That's why we make the learners measure and count. Okay, I hope that's clear. I didn't whip through it too quickly, but it's turning the activity into a graph, which is what the learners also do. This is just what our data sheets look like. We make it quite visual. There are metadata for those that are scientists. Very important to know what the site, the date, the transect, and so on is. And then we have an example of how things are counted and how things are measured. How you measure a limpet. And then learners have to put the count and the length data in there. It's really very similar to what we do in real science, just maybe a little bit more visual in that we provide images, but really it's the same kind of data. It's real science. Then our next activity is a little race, without being able to run, but we have these 3 groups of learners, and they have to collect as much litter as they can in a given time. Usually it's between 10 and 15 minutes. And then the team that has collected the most items wins. And they then, after collection, classify them according to a methodology developed by the Beach Co-op. For those that have seen Anja Omardin speak yesterday, she's the director of the Beach Co-op, and they're using these, they've identified the top 12 items. These ones are for rocky shores, and there's some for sandy beaches that they primarily focus on. And we then classify and count. Again, now you might ask again, why do you want these data? It's maybe quite obvious, but here's a graph that is from the Beach Co-op website, to which we want to contribute our data. And it shows those 12 most important items, or most commonly found items, the dirty dozen, and the abundances that they have found in all their surveys. So again, turning this kind of fun activity into a graph. You can see the top item here. are sweet wrappers, the next one are cool drink lids, and then lollipop sticks. You know, this is very important when you want to approach both consumers and producers to combat the problem of plastic we have in the oceans. So yeah, this is why we're doing it, and this is what we're doing with the learners. Then we go back to the class after the outing, and we bring them their own data, the data that they've collected, and they now do a worksheet. Sometimes it's marked, sometimes not, depends on the teacher. I've mentioned, okay, I have probably not mentioned, before we go to the Rocky Shore, we actually give them an introductory lesson as well. But here they draw graphs and they answer questions on how to interpret. And it's always a very much an eye-opening experience. By then we know the learners a little bit and they know us, and it's very nice interactions. So the other thing we'd like to do is we forever would like to improve our teaching resources and make them available freely online, which some of them are, and this is fairly new. We're really trying to improve. So any feedback we receive from teachers, we normally incorporate. Then we have also on the website a little blog, and my colleague Mark van Rensburg, he makes video clips. I'll show you one right at the end. That also features on the blog. There's some information on Rocky Shore ecology, and we're working on developing an interactive graphing tool where learners can make these graphs. You can see an example here from the litter surveys where we plot litter in form of a pie chart, but you can also plot it in form of, say, a bar graph, and you know they can flip around between different graphing options. So it's again to build maths and science skills in a way that's accessible and fun. So that's what the website is currently. It's been developed by Isabel, my colleague at St. John, and they have done all of this free of charge. And it's quite amazing how far they got, but we're still in the process of building it. So bear with us. It will be quite nice, I think. So, and then to measure the impact we're having, because it's nice to say, okay, LIMPET has been great fun. I think it has for both the learners, the teachers, well, and us facilitators. And we always come back from the Rocky Shore smiling. We also need to quantify this. So we have developed questionnaires. You can see here some about an understanding of a LIMPET. And we give them the questionnaires before and after the surveys. And what we found when we evaluated the surveys of 2018, that there was a 40% knowledge increase for material that is part of their curriculum through LIMPET. And we also incorporate the feedback from them, you know, just to say where can we improve, what did you like most, what was most challenging. So we're trying to improve here because that's not enough when we want to grasp our impact on environmental stewardship. We'd like to develop something that goes more into measuring appreciation, but we're new to this and we're still learning, so that's in the making. So fundraising is a never-ending challenge. Like I said, we'd like to provide this experience for free to learners from disadvantaged schools. We have made our first small grant that we received from the Table Mountain Fund stretched quite far. It was 25,000 Rand that we got in 2008, and that's about $1,500 if there are any international people. The rest we all just, you know, made through our own time and efforts and organizations that supported us. And we now just got another fund from the Table Mountain, another grant from the Table Mountain Fund for next year, or actually the next 3 years, which is very exciting. And it will allow us to take a lot more learners to the Rocky Shores and do more teacher training workshops to foster an intern who will be our part-time, or actually our full-time LIMPET coordinator. You know, and it's really a great relief because we feel that, you know, now we can unfold a little bit more over the next 3 years. And yeah, I would like to say thank you in particular to the Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries for supporting me and also other resources, Western Cape government through the Center for Conservation Education, which is part of theirs, the SCION, South African Environmental Observation Network, to which Thomas, our colleague, belongs, and he's been a great resource and collaborator. They've also supported food parcels and transport for some of the outings, Table Mountain Fund and STEED for the extra funding that we got. And yeah, if you happen to be a teacher, you can book a LIMPET experience through, the website, but you can also, or through the telephone, that's the phone number for Weinberg Center for Conservation Education. But yeah, feel free to get in touch. And now, after all my talking, I'd like to actually show you a video that's put together by Mark, our colleague. He does that for really almost all the outings. So I hope it works. Okay, that's it from me. I hope this worked somehow.
Hi, thanks, Maya. That was great. It's very, very interesting to hear more about your program and all the activities that you're running. And the video did seem to run quite well. If anyone has any other questions or comments, please can you send them on in the chat. We had a comment from Joan Porter to say, this is a wonderful opportunity. Thank you. I've often heard about the program but didn't know the details. Then there was a question from Megan that says, does the project LIMPET work with the Two Oceans Aquarium on the high school marine science curriculum?
Yes, yes. Hi, Megan. It does. Russell Stevens is one of our big supporters, and we're trying to have a LIMPET program for each of the schools that are currently signed up for the science curriculum. I actually was meant to mention it in this talk. It appeared on one of the slides and I forgot to mention. So thanks, Megs, for pointing it out. And at this stage, there are 10 schools in the Western Cape, and we're trying to, have rocky shore sites associated with each of those schools. That's the plan. So yeah, we're very much working with them, and we're in the process of setting up LIMPET with them and for those marine science schools.
Then there was another question from Megan saying, what are the long-term plans to potentially roll out the education components of Project LIMPET with schools to other provinces?
They are already happening, or the plans are happening. Then we got slowed down a little bit. So we have one very engaged teacher who's joined LIMPET from KZN, and Gary Robson, and he runs a very intensive field-based marine study with his grade 9s. It's a privileged school, so they have a lot more opportunities, and he's developed really something quite impressive for those rocky shores. So he's joined us. We met at the MSEN, which is Marine and Coastal Educators Network, which really is what started LIMPET. We all met there. And I met also another group from the Northern Cape, from Port Nolloth, and we were going to set up a LIMPET site and run teacher training workshop with 20 teachers in the Northern Cape in August. Whether that's going to go ahead, we don't know, but we will do it eventually. So, and not only in the different provinces, we also have a plan to start LIMPET in Angola and Namibia. I'm not sure how much interest there will be in Namibia because there are not that many people, but the Rocky Shore Monitoring Program is now extended for that region, and we have at least the funding to roll it out into Namibia and Angola. So we just have to find interested teachers and develop the curriculum with that's relevant to those areas. So yeah, we're expanding slowly.
Okay, that's very exciting. Quite wonderful that you're moving on to like 2 different countries. That's quite an achievement. I have a question that's related to that. The map that you showed at the beginning with the various ticks along the coast, was that indicating your partners or indicating other sites that you've used for the program?
So, okay, maybe it was confusing. So this is the science program I run. So I'm a researcher at DEFF, and LIMPET is the education, sort of the outreach link from my side that links to this program. So these are regular monitoring sites for the government where we monitor ecosystem health, really. And these sites are where we operate. And I mean, this is just one tick, but it involves multiple sites. And here as well, we have, this tick is, for example, Namakwa, where we have 10 sites. And, at this stage, we have 36 sites around the coast of South Africa alone, and then now started Namibia as well. So this is where we do very similar surveys, maybe slightly more intensely, but we also do the photographs and quadrat studies. And this is the database that LIMPET feeds into, basically, the bigger picture. And was your question about the organizations or the sites?
Sorry, Maya, I was confused. I wasn't sure if the ticks were linked to the organizations that you work with, or if there were sites that the LIMPET program had been operating in. But
I'm sorry, I probably created this confusion by not clarifying it. So thanks for the question. So these are long-term monitoring sites that exist where we do the scientific side. LIMPET at this stage exists in the Cape Peninsula at Delbrook and soon at Soetwater. And then Port Nolloth is the next one, and Durban is another site that we have planned. But there is nothing that stops us from setting up. We had interest from schools in Overberg, and so we could link with these existing sites. So basically, these where the ticks are, you find rocky shores that have bolts in them marking transects. That's what it is.
Okay, thanks, Maya. There's a comment from Momalezi that says, "Thanks so much for the opportunity. Great video clip." There was a question from Holly saying, "Thank you, that was great, really enjoyed it. What language are these lessons given in?"
That's a good question. At this stage, in English and Afrikaans, depending, because we're mostly in the Cape. And we have assistants that come with us, and they are from all languages of South Africa, really. Whoever we find that helps us. So sometimes it really helps to have someone to speak isiXhosa, for example, and one of our educators speaks it. But the teaching languages at this stage are English and Afrikaans, and we'd like to expand it to all the coastal languages.
Thanks, Maya. There's a comment from Trevor that says, "Hi, Maya, great presentation, thanks. If the program is planned into the West Coast, I would like to get involved or enrolled. Is there a way that they could contact you?"
That's Trevor. Hi, Trevor. Yes, they could contact us through, the easiest is to email us to the email address that I was given. Which is here. What we need is someone who basically champions it, because we can't be everywhere. So what we'd like to build is a node that has its own equipment, which is not that much, but you need quadrats, you need those knee pads, and teachers, and also safety gear, which is a new thing. And we can help with developing the materials, but then someone needs to champion it, and that's, it takes a bit of work and it takes a lot of passion. So if there's someone who's passionate to take the lead in another area outside Cape Town, like the people in Northern Cape and KZN, then by all means, it would be great to do LIMPET on the West Coast. There's also where Trevor's in Saldanha, and well, he's along the West Coast, but the West Coast National Park is also in dire need of a rocky shore monitoring site. So, you could link with our long-term monitoring sites there.
Thanks, Maya. There's a question from Leslie that says, "Hi, Maya. Thanks so much for your talk. I think it's such worthy work, and fieldwork classrooms, where possible, are so much more informative. I was just wondering whether beyond the scientific method which is being taught, is the value of these ecosystems also taught? And were you in touch with the Dirty Dozen? Is awareness created about the harmful nature of such litter?"
Yes, and the same talk would have probably been given slightly differently by one of our educators. As I mentioned, I'm the data nerd, so I probably emphasize that point beyond what it is. One of the activities where we don't collect data is really geared towards fostering the appreciation and the intimacy with that environment, where learners get to explore rock pools and they get to look at organisms, gently maybe touch them and explore the wonders. And we very much, especially our educators, are really good at creating the enthusiasm for this environment. So I think the value of the marine ecosystem with regards to it just being wonderful and it being a part of nature that is really inspiring is definitely shining through. And from the feedback we get from the learners is what they enjoy the most. It's really playful that you get to just do rock pooling and see some fish and understand who eats who. And it's an immersive nature experience. That's what we're trying to create. And I think in the short time that we have, because each school at this stage is going once to the Rocky Shore, it's not a lot, I think we are getting that right. When it comes to the Dirty Dozen or the litter surveys, and litter is one of our themes that features very strongly in our introductory lesson, which again I might not have brought out clearly enough. Before learners go to the Rocky Shore, we visit the schools and we give them a lesson that is on one hand about ecosystems and threats to ecosystems. And one of the biggest threats that we talk about is litter, which is then turned into an activity. So we bring that, and then when we go back, we actually make learners draw graphs about the litter they collected and ask them questions like, what would you advise the government to change to combat the threat of litter? And we ask learners to understand, that it's in our power to change this, and it's in everyone's power. And yeah, so I hope it's definitely on our mind, and I hope it comes through. And yeah, so it's one of our primary themes is plastics and litter.
Maya, you mentioned the survey that you do at the school about what suggestions they would have to combat litter. Can you expand on any of their suggestions?
Yes, I'm always quite surprised, but what keeps coming is the suggestion that the government should employ more people to pick up litter. And that starts a discussion, where we say, okay, well, how about people pick up their own litter? So that's one of the common ones where they say, let's employ people to clean up. And we then, bring it back to the community. That's one of the things, trying to think what other things came out. I think that learners also suggest, those that are more aware of the topic, that to create biodegradable packaging and, eliminate things like straws that they aware of. So, I mean, a lot of learners are aware of those existing campaigns that, have been increasing over the last years.
Thanks, Maya. I see. There don't seem to be any other questions in the chat at the moment, but if anyone has any questions, I'm sure you can contact Maya, or you can contact us at SST, and we'll be happy to pass that along. For now, since there are no other questions, I just want to say thanks so much, Maya. It was great to have you present today, and it was very interesting to hear all the work that you're doing and all the exciting expansions that you're planning. And thanks to everyone who joined today. I'm glad you took time out of your social distancing and your lockdown to join us. But thanks everyone, and we do have another webinar taking place tomorrow if anyone is interested. And I see there's another comment in the chat that says, thank you for the presentation, great work indeed. So thanks everyone. There's another thank you message in the chat. Oh, and one more question from Momalezi. Is the LIMPET work with other youth programs that deals with youth, particularly in schools? Or does LIMPET mainly work with schools?
At this stage, we only work with schools because we build on what the Center for Conservation Education has been doing. You know, they have an extensive network of schools, and that's how we advertise. So at this stage, this is the case, and what we'd like to do, is to encourage other organizations. For example, actually, we were recently approached by I Am Water who are doing very similar things, to just join forces. And like I said, we're also working with the Beach Corps, which isn't primarily a education program, but it features in their objectives as well to reach out to youth. So we're trying to, wherever we can, create synergy. This is really what LIMPET is about. So whilst we're still starting, we're not doing everything. We're not against working with other organizations at all. It's just at this stage, primarily we work with schools, directly with the teachers and the learners.
I see, and with such a young program, you seem to have done quite a lot in that amount of time. Talking about the Beach Co-op, there's a comment from Anya that says that is so interesting regarding the learners suggesting government. Tells us there's a need to understand how we engage people and take responsibility and pride for our environment, which is very true. You don't often hear people suggest, merely not littering. It's often that there should be biodegradable plastic or more people to clean it up. Thanks, Anya.
Yes, thanks. I totally agree. And whilst I think our model is very much, we have very short interaction with each learner. It's really three interactions. We have a pre-visit at the school, we have an outing, and then we have a visit afterwards. So I don't think we can't expect to create necessarily life-changing impact in these three interactions, but we're hoping that we can start, we maybe plant a seed, or where there is a seed, add a bit of water, and together with messaging that organizations like Anya's Beach Corp is doing, we can hopefully bring it to the awareness that it's up to us, each one of us, to keep our environment clean.
Thanks, Anya. There don't seem to be any more comments in the chat. So if anyone has any further comments at a later stage, again, I'm sure Maya would be happy to receive that, or you can use the email addresses listed there, or contact SST. For now, I just want to say thanks again, everyone, for joining. And it looks like there's one more comment. Learners from disadvantaged backgrounds are possibly familiar with PWDP programs, which provide income for family members. That comment was from Matilda. That's a valid point. It makes sense that that might be their first assumption about job creation.
Yes, exactly. So the messaging will, it would be nice to change that messaging. It's also, a big ask. I mean, what's also good about LIMPET is that we get to go to these areas. It's an eye-opener. If you go, to Modderdam High School or Ocean View, and you actually see the schoolyard and the trash that's everywhere and the glass pieces, and it's very much a different backdrop, a different baseline that these learners are working with. So we can't expect that it's necessarily one of the values to keep things clean. It's a big things need to shift for those values to shift.
Very true. And hopefully they will continue to shift, even if it's gradually. Thanks again, Maya. I think we can close here for today. It was great having you here today, and thanks so much. It's wonderful to hear about all the encouraging programs that are out there.
Thanks,
everyone.
Tara. Thanks a lot. It was great. Thanks.